You will give up that bedroom, or you can get out of this house!
I never imagined the worst betrayal of my life would happen over a bowl of mashed potatoes. Seriously, no screaming match, no dramatic build-up, no warning, just an ordinary Sunday family dinner that turned into the moment my entire life changed. I'm Olivia Carter, 28 years old, and I work as a senior financial analyst. I've always been the kind of person who believes problems can be solved logically. Give me a spreadsheet, a mortgage statement, or a tax return, and I'll figure it out. People? Not so much, especially family. My dad passed away a little over 2 years ago after a long battle with cancer. Losing him was devastating. But what happened afterward was somehow even harder. When Dad married my stepmother, Karen, I genuinely tried to make things work. She had a son named Tyler, who was 4 years younger than me. We were never close, but we were civil. At least, I thought we were. After Dad died, everything changed. Karen slowly started acting like the entire house belonged to her. Not overnight. It happened little by little. She started redecorating. Family photos of my mom quietly disappeared from the walls. Dad's old workshop became Tyler's gaming room. The dining room furniture my parents had saved for years to buy was suddenly outdated and replaced with something Karen liked better. Every change came with the same excuse. It's time to move on. At first, I kept my mouth shut. I figured everyone grieves differently. Besides, I wasn't planning on living there forever. I had a solid career, good savings, and I was already looking at buying my own place. The only reason I stayed was because the house meant everything to my dad. It was the home he built with my mom before she passed away. Walking away from it felt like walking away from him. So I stayed. Big mistake. Here's the part that still makes my friends call me an idiot. For almost 2 years, I paid for almost everything. Property taxes, insurance, the new water heater when the old one failed, half the grocery bills, internet, electricity, even Karen's car repair after she claimed she couldn't afford it. Why? Because every single time she asked, she'd say the same thing. We're family. And every single time, I believed her. I wasn't keeping score. I never asked for repayment. I honestly thought I was helping preserve the home my father loved. Meanwhile, Tyler was 24 years old. He had bounced between 3 different jobs in 1 year, spent most of his time playing online games, ordered takeout almost every night, and somehow always had money for the newest electronics. Guess whose credit card several of those purchases ended up on? Mine. Again. Because Karen always promised she'd pay me back. Spoiler alert, she never did. Still, I tolerated it. Until last Sunday. That morning actually started great. I woke up early, went grocery shopping, bought steaks, fresh vegetables, a bottle of wine Karen liked, even picked up a cheesecake from the bakery Dad used to take me to when I was little. Looking back, it's almost funny. I literally paid for the dinner where they tried to throw me out. Around 6 that evening, we all sat down together. For the first 15 minutes, everything felt normal. Karen talked about a neighbor who'd sold their house. Tyler complained about his internet speed. I mostly listened while cutting into my steak. Then Tyler sighed dramatically. I seriously can't deal with my room anymore. Karen looked at him sympathetically. I know, honey. He pointed toward the hallway. Olivia's room is almost twice the size. I didn't think anything of it, until Karen turned toward me. You know, I've actually been thinking about that. I looked up. About what? She smiled. I think it's time you switched rooms. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I honestly thought she was joking. My office is in there. I work from home 3 days a week. Karen shrugged. You can make the guest room work. The guest room barely fits a bed. You'll figure something out. I looked at Tyler. He wouldn't even look at me. He just kept smiling at his plate. Something felt off, like they'd already had this conversation before dinner. I put my fork down. I'm not moving. Karen's smile disappeared instantly. I'm not asking. I blinked. I'm sorry? You heard me. I looked around the table. Neither of them looked surprised. That was when it hit me. This had been planned. Karen folded her arms. Tyler deserves the bigger room. I kept my voice calm. Then maybe Tyler should get his own apartment. He slammed his glass onto the table. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means you're 24. You've lived here rent-free your entire life. And maybe it's time to stop expecting everyone else to rearrange their lives for you. Karen suddenly pushed her chair back. The legs scraped loudly across the hardwood floor. Then she pointed toward the hallway. If you're going to disrespect my son, then you can pack your things and get out of my house. Everything went quiet. Even the television in the living room suddenly seemed too loud. I stared at her. My house? Yes. In die Haus. I looked around the dining room. The same dining room where my dad had taught me how to play chess. The same room where my mom used to bake birthday cakes. The same room I'd helped pay to maintain after Dad died. And she was calling it her house. Tyler leaned back with the biggest grin I'd ever seen. He actually thought he'd won. For a split second, I considered arguing. Then I realized something. You can't reason with people who've already convinced themselves they're entitled to everything you have. So instead, I smiled. Not a fake smile, a calm one. Okay. Karen frowned. Okay. I'll leave. She looked genuinely surprised. No fight? No. No begging? No. Tyler laughed. Damn, that was easier than I expected. That sentence told me everything. They'd planned this, probably for weeks, maybe longer. Karen smiled again. Good. I think that's best. So do I. I stood up, walked upstairs, packed 2 suitcases, grabbed my laptop, important documents, family photo albums, and the small wooden watch Dad had worn every day for 20 years. Everything else stayed behind. When I carried my bags downstairs, neither of them offered to help. Karen just crossed her arms. I hope you've learned something from this. I looked at her. I have. She smiled confidently. Good? I picked up my suitcase. The funny thing is, I don't think you're going to enjoy what I learned. She frowned. What does that mean? I smiled. You'll find out soon enough. Then I walked out the front door. I didn't look back once. At the time, Karen and Tyler thought they'd just gotten rid of the one person standing between them and complete control of the house. They had no idea. Walking away wasn't the biggest mistake anyone made that night. Throwing me out was. Because less than 24 hours later, I would discover something that turned their victory into the beginning of their worst nightmare. I checked into a small boutique hotel about 20 minutes outside downtown Asheville. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, and far enough away that I didn't have to worry about running into Karen or Tyler at the grocery store. After carrying my bags upstairs, I locked the door behind me and just stood there. For the first time in years, nobody was asking me for money. Nobody was calling my name from another room. Nobody expected me to solve all their problems. It was strangely peaceful. I ordered a burger, kicked off my shoes, and opened my laptop. Whenever my life gets chaotic, I always do the same thing. I look at the numbers. Numbers don't lie. People do. Within a few minutes, every one of my financial accounts was open on the screen. Savings, checking. Investments, retirement. Emergency fund. After everything loaded, I leaned back in my chair. I had just over $238,000 in savings. No debt except a small balance on one credit card that I paid off every month. A stable 6-figure income. Excellent credit. I'd spent the last decade preparing for financial independence. The only thing holding me back had been guilt, not money. I laughed to myself. I'd spent 2 years acting like I couldn't afford to leave. The truth, I could have left any time. I just couldn't let go of the idea that staying somehow honored my dad. It didn't. It only enabled 2 people who had stopped seeing me as family a long time ago. My phone buzzed. It was my best friend, Emma. We'd known each other since college. She was also the one person who had been telling me for over a year to move out. The text simply read, "Please tell me you finally left." I called her. She answered before the second ring. You actually did it, didn't you? I did. There was a long pause. Then she laughed. I've been waiting for this phone call for 2 years. I should have listened sooner. You absolutely should have. I filled her in on everything. The dinner, Karen's Ultimstim, Tyler's smug smile, getting kicked out. By the time I finished, Emma was silent. Finally, she said, I've got something to show you tomorrow. What? A house. I rolled my eyes. Emma, I'm serious. I'm not ready. You are. No? You absolutely are. I literally moved into a hotel 6 hours ago. So? So maybe give me a week. Nope. What time? 9. You already scheduled it? I know you. You really do. She laughed. I'll pick you up. The next morning, Megadina drove me into one of the quieter neighborhoods outside Asheville. The roads wound through mature oak trees before opening into a neighborhood I'd never visited before. Every house looked different. No cookie-cutter developments, no traffic, no noise. Then she pulled into a driveway. I stared through the first windshield. The house was beautiful. Not huge, not flashy, just home. White brick exterior, dark shutters, a wraparound porch, large maple trees surrounding the backyard. The realtor walked us through the front door. The smell of fresh paint mixed with polished hardwood floors. Sunlight poured through oversized windows. The kitchen overlooked a wooded backyard. There was a fireplace in the living room, a dedicated office with built-in bookshelves, and upstairs, a bedroom with a balcony overlooking the mountains. I stepped outside onto that balcony, closed my eyes, and took the deepest breath I'd taken in years. No tension, no anxiety, just silent. Emma leaned against the railing. You already love it. I do. So what's stopping you? I looked around. Nothing. For the first time, that answer was actually true. 3 days later, the inspection came back clean. The financing was approved. The closing date was moved up because the sellers had already relocated. Everything happened unbelievably fast. A week after Karen threw me out, I was standing inside my own house, holding my own keys. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen thought she'd made me homeless. Instead, she accidentally pushed me into buying the nicest home I'd ever lived in. As I unlocked the front door for the first time, something inside me finally relaxed. This house wasn't connected to painful memories. Nobody here expected anything from me. Nobody could throw me out. It was mine, every single inch of it. I spent the next 2 days unpacking. My office came together first, then the kitchen, then my bedroom. For the first time since Dad died, I actually slept through the entire night. No anxiety, no stress, just peace. Unfortunately, peace didn't last very long. The following Tuesday, I met with someone my father had trusted for decades, attorney Daniel Mercer. Dad always used to say, if I ever get into serious trouble, Daniel's my first phone call. Turns out, mine too. Daniel welcomed me into his office and listened patiently as I explained everything from beginning to end. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he simply asked, Do you have the deed? I think so. I handed him the folder I'd grabbed while packing. Dad always kept important paperwork in a small airproof safe. Thankfully, I'd taken everything before leaving. Daniel carefully examined each document. Property records, mortgage paperwork, estate filings, county tax assessments. He spent nearly 20 minutes reviewing everything without saying a word. Finally, he looked up, then smiled. Not politely, the kind of smile a poker player gives after realizing everyone else has terrible cards. Olivia, I have a question. Okay. Has Karen ever claimed she owns the house outright? I laughed. She practically says it every day. He nodded slowly. I was afraid you'd say that. My stomach tightened. What? Daniel turned his monitor toward me. This house wasn't purchased during your father's marriage to Karen. No. My parents bought it years before. Exactly. He clicked another document. The title history confirms that. I still wasn't following. So? He leaned back. So? Karen doesn't own the entire property. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, she legally can't. He opened another file. Your father never transferred full ownership. My heartbeat started climbing. Daniel continued. Based on the deed, the estate filings, and North Carolina inheritance law. He looked directly at me. You own half. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because it sounded impossible. Half? He nodded. Half it finiti, but owned. She told me it was her house. Nasta? Daniel smiled. People say a lot of things, eh? The county recorder says something different. I stared at the paperwork. He wasn't finished. The current market value is approximately... He glanced at another page. $540,000. I swallowed. So my share, is worth roughly $270,000. The room suddenly felt very quiet. 2 years. I'd spent 2 years paying taxes, utilities, repairs, insurance, on a house that I already legally owned. Daniel folded his hands. And Olivia, there's one more thing. What? When Karen told you to leave, she wasn't just being cruel. He paused. She was attempting to remove a legal co-owner from jointly owned property. I stared at him. So, she couldn't actually kick me out? He smiled. No, she never had that authority. I slowly leaned back in my chair. Everything suddenly made sense. Karen wasn't confident because she knew the law. She was confident because she assumed I didn't. Daniel reached for a yellow legal pad. So, what would you like to do? I looked out at his office window for several seconds. Then I answered, I'm done being taken advantage of. He nodded. I figured. I don't want revenge. I just want what's mine. Daniel smiled. Sometimes, justice feels an awful lot like revenge. I couldn't argue with that. He began writing. I'll prepare a formal legal demand. What happens after that? We give Karen 2 options. Either she buys your ownership interest, or we ask the court to force the sale of the property. I thought about Tyler's grin at the dinner table. Karen calling it her house. The years of manipulation. The thousands of dollars I'd spent. Then I smiled. Let's send the letter. Daniel nodded once. I'll have it delivered tomorrow morning. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Karen. Don't forget the electric bill is due Friday. Make sure you transfer your half before then. I looked at the message. Read it twice. Then burst out laughing in the middle of the parking lot. She still thought I was paying the bills. She still thought she was in control. She still believed she'd won. She had absolutely no idea that less than 24 hours from now, a certified envelope from my attorney would land in her mailbox. And everything she thought she owned was about to slip through her fingers. The next morning, I didn't wake up wondering what Karen was doing. I honestly didn't care. For the first time in years, my life wasn't revolving around someone else's drama. I made coffee, answered a few work emails from my new home office, and joined my first meeting of the day. Around 10:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. The letter has been delivered. She signed for it herself. That was all the message said. Simple. Professional, no celebration, no unnecessary commentary, just confirmation. I smiled, set my phone face down, and went back to work. The funny thing about real revenge is that it doesn't usually happen in one explosive moment. Sometimes, it begins with a signature on a certified mail receipt. About an hour later, my phone started vibrating non-stop. Karen. Ignored. Karen again. Ignored. Then Tyler. Ignored. By lunchtime, I had 12 missed calls, 7 text messages, and 3 voicemails. I still didn't answer. For 2 years, they'd expected me to drop everything the second they called. Today, they could wait. When work finally slowed down, I listened to the first voicemail. Karen sounded furious. "Olivia, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I just got some ridiculous letter from an attorney." A pause. "You need to call me immediately." Click. The second voicemail was even louder. "What is this nonsense about you owning half the house? Whoever this lawyer is, he's trying to scam us." Click. The third voicemail was different. No yelling, just panic. "Oh, please call me." I almost felt bad. Almost. About 20 minutes later, Tyler called again. This time, I answered. "Finally!" he snapped. "See, what the hell are you doing?" "Working." "Did you hire a lawyer?" "Yes." "You actually think you own half the house?" "I don't think it. I know it." He laughed. "No, you don't." "Read the deed." Silence. Then, "My mom says that lawyer is lying." "Your mom can believe whatever she wants. You can't force us to leave." "I haven't forced anyone to do anything. You sent us legal papers." "I sent you options." He scoffed. "You've lost your mind." "No. I finally found it." Before he could respond, I hung up. An hour later, Daniel called. "I figured you'd be hearing from them." "You figured correctly," he chuckled. "They've already contacted my office." "And?" Karen insisted there had to be some mistake. There wasn't. No, there wasn't. I leaned back in my chair. What happens now? They have 30 days. If they can buy your ownership interest, wonderful. And if they can't, he smiled, the court will handle the rest. That evening, I decided it was time to clean up one final loose end. I logged into my online banking account. There they were, exactly where I'd forgotten about them. Authorized users. Karen, Tyler. I actually laughed. Dad had been sick when I added them to my premium rewards card. At the time, it made sense. Prescription pickups, emergency grocery runs, medical supplies. But after he passed away, the emergency spending somehow transformed into luxury spending. Restaurant bills, designer handbags, gaming equipment, weekend shopping trips, streaming services, gym memberships they barely used. The more I scrolled, the more unbelievable it became. I'd never really added it all together before. Now I did. Over the last 22 months, Karen and Tyler had charged just over $31,000 to my account. $31,000. I sat there staring at the screen, not angry, just disappointed. How had I let it go this far? Then I remembered something my father used to tell me. Kindness without boundaries eventually becomes permission. He'd been right. I clicked Karen's name. Remove authorized user. Confirm. Then Tyler. Confirm. The bank processed both requests instantly. Cards canceled. Access revoked. Done. I closed my laptop. That chapter of my life was officially over. 45 minutes later, my phone rang. Tyler. I answered on the second ring. What now? He was practically screaming. My card got declined. I know. What do you mean you know? I canceled it. You can't just do that. I literally just did. I'm standing at the register. That's unfortunate. There are people waiting behind me. I guess you'll have to put some things back. You embarrassed me. No. I stopped paying for you. His breathing became heavier. I needed those groceries. I glanced at the digital receipt the bank had just emailed me. Groceries? Really? The declined purchase included premium steaks, imported whiskey, energy drinks, expensive headphones, and a new smartwatch. Interesting definition of groceries. I think you'll survive. Then I hung up. Less than 2 minutes later, Karen called. She skipped the fake politeness this time. How dare you cancel those cards? They're my cards. We needed them. No, you were using them. We're family. I couldn't help smiling. Funny. I remember saying that once. This isn't the same thing. No, it isn't. When your husband was alive, he wanted us taken care of. My father wanted his family taken care of. We are family. I paused. Were we family Sunday night? Silence. Were we family when you told me to pack my bags? Nothing. Were we family when Tyler laughed while I was leaving? She tried changing the subject. You're being vindictive. No, I'm being responsible. You owe us. That sentence actually made me laugh. Owe you? After everything I've paid for? You lived here, too. I also paid the property taxes. Ingenious silence. The roof. Silence. The furnace. Silence. The insurance. Silence. The utilities. Silence. I've spent over $80,000 keeping that house running. She didn't deny it, because she couldn't. Instead, she whispered something that genuinely surprised me. I didn't realize. No, you didn't. The next morning, Daniel invited me to stop by his office. He had news. Good news. As soon as I sat down, he slid a folder across the desk. I did a little more digging. Inside were copies of recent loan inquiries, credit reports, public records. I looked up. What am I looking at? Karen has already contacted 4 lenders, and all 4 denied her preliminary qualification. That fast? He nodded. She doesn't have sufficient income. What about Tyler? He tried too. I raised an eyebrow. Daniel almost smiled. He listed his occupation as content creator. I couldn't help laughing. And he couldn't verify consistent income. So unless someone hands them nearly $300,000, they're not buying your share. I leaned back. For the first time since Dad died, I finally felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not revenge, not satisfaction. Relief. Because this wasn't about making Karen lose. It was about finally stopping myself from losing. As I stood to leave, Daniel handed me another document. The deadline expires in 26 days. What happens then? If they still can't buy you out. He closed the folder. We file for a court-ordered sale. I nodded. Outside, the afternoon sun broke through the wet clouds for the first time all week. Meanwhile, across town, Karen was staring at a stack of loan rejection letters. Tyler had just lost access to my credit cards. Their phone calls weren't working anymore. Their threats weren't working anymore. And for the first time since they decided to throw me out, they were beginning to realize something terrifying. The person they treated like a burden had actually been the one holding their entire world together. 3 days later, Karen sent one final text. Can we please meet? Just the 3 of us. No lawyers. We can fix this. I read the message, smiled, then forwarded it directly to Daniel. His reply came less than a minute later. Tell her we'll meet, but I will be there. Perfect. Because Karen still believed this was a family disagreement. She was about to learn it had become a legal one. Saturday morning was cold and overcast. A light rain had settled over downtown Asheville, leaving the sidewalks slick, and the windows of the coffee shop covered in tiny droplets. I got there 10 minutes early, not because I was nervous, because I hate being late. Daniel was already inside, sitting at a corner table with a leather portfolio resting beside his coffee. He looked up as I walked in. Morning. Morning. You ready? I looked through the window. Karen's SUV had just pulled into the parking lot. I am now. A minute later, Karen and Tyler walked inside. The difference between this meeting and Sunday dinner was impossible to ignore. A week ago, they looked confident. Now, Karen looked like she hadn't slept in days. Tyler avoided making eye contact altogether. They sat down across from us. For several uncomfortable seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Karen broke the silence. Olivia, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I almost laughed. The wrong foot? She nodded. We're family. Daniel quietly opened his portfolio but didn't say a word. Karen continued. I said things I shouldn't have. I looked at her. You told me to get out. I was angry. You called it your house. I wasn't thinking. You watched your son laugh while I packed my life into the suitcases. Tyler immediately looked down at the table. Karen sighed. I know. I'm sorry. It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from her in years, but it came a little too late. I folded my hands on the table. I appreciate the apology. Her shoulders relaxed. But it doesn't change anything. The hope disappeared from her face. Daniel finally spoke. My client has no interest in personal conflict. We're here to discuss the property. Karen nodded quickly. We don't want to sell. Daniel slid several documents across the table. Then the solution is straightforward. Purchase Ms. Carter's ownership interest. Karen looked helpless. You know we can't. Daniel didn't respond. Because we all already knew the answer. She looked back at me. Can't we work something out? What kind of arrangement? I don't know. You could move back. Tyler looked up in surprise. Karen continued. You can have your room back. We'll pretend that none of this happened. I stared at her for several seconds, then quietly asked, Do you honestly think this is about the bedroom? She didn't answer. It stopped being about the bedroom the moment you decided I was disposable. Silence settled over the table. I reached into my bag and placed a folder in front of her. I brought something too. Karen opened it. Inside were copies of every payment I'd made over the previous 2 years. Property taxes, roof repairs, insurance, utility bills, landscaping, emergency plumbing work, even grocery receipts. The final page contained one number highlighted in yellow. 470-62. Karen stared at it. Tyler leaned over to look. Neither of them spoke. I broke the silence. That's how much I spent keeping that house running. Karen whispered, Oh, I didn't realize. I know. You never asked me to pay you back. No. I trusted you. Tyler finally spoke for the first time. We thought... He stopped. What? He swallowed hard. We thought Dad left everything to Mom. Daniel calmly replied, That's exactly why title searches exist. Nobody had anything else to say. After another minute, Karen quietly asked, So what happens now? Daniel answered before I could. The deadline remains unchanged. If financing cannot be secured, the court will authorize the sale. Karen looked at me one last time. Please, that house is all we have. I met her eyes. It was all I had, too. Then I stood. So we're done? Daniel closed his portfolio. We're done. As we walked toward the exit, Karen called after me. Olivia. I turned. I really am sorry. This time, I believed her. Not because of the tears, because for the first time, she wasn't asking for anything. She simply looked broken. I gave her a small nod. I hope you find a way forward. Then Daniel and I walked out into the rain. The next 3 weeks passed quickly. Karen applied for more loans. Every application was denied. She contacted relatives. No one could help. Tyler tried picking up extra work, but it was far too little and far too late. When the 30-day deadline expired, Daniel filed the partition action. The court reviewed the ownership records, verified the deed, confirmed my legal interest, and approved the sale. Just like that, the process moved forward. No courtroom drama, no shouting, just paperwork. Within 2 weeks, the house was listed. 3 days after that, An offer came in above asking price. By the end of the month, the sale officially closed. Standing outside the title company's office after signing the final paperwork felt surreal. The house I'd grown up in was no longer ours. For a brief moment, I wondered what Dad would think. Then I remembered something he used to tell me whenever life got complicated. A home isn't the walls you live inside. It's the people who make you feel safe. The walls had stopped feeling like home long before they were sold. My share of the proceeds was wired into my account later that afternoon. I didn't celebrate. I paid off the remaining balance on my mortgage, moved the rest into long-term investments, and quietly closed that chapter of my life. About 6 weeks later, I ran into an old neighbor while shopping for groceries. After catching up for a few minutes, she casually asked, "Have you heard about Karen?" I shook my head. "They're renting a small apartment on the other side of town." She hesitated. I guess losing the house hit them pretty hard. I simply nodded. There wasn't much else to say. A few days later, I received one final email. Not from Karen, from Daniel. Subject: Estate matter officially closed. Everything had been finalized. No pending claims, no appeals, no unresolved issues. One sentence at the bottom stood out. "Congratulations, you're finally free." I read it twice before closing my laptop. That evening, Ila Yipomate came over for dinner. We grilled steaks on the back deck as the sun slowly disappeared behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. Halfway through the meal, she smiled at me. "So, any regrets?" I looked around my home. The quiet living room, the office I'd always wanted, the family photos of Mom and Dad hanging exactly where I wanted them. Then I smiled. "Only one." "What's that?" "I should have left sooner." Emma laughed. "I've been saying that for 2 years." "I know." She raised her glass. "To new beginnings." I clinked mine against hers. "To boundaries." She smiled. "You know, I think your dad would have been proud." I looked toward the mountains as the evening breeze moved through the trees. "I hope so." Because in the end, I didn't win because Karen lost. I won because I finally stopped confusing love with obligation. Family isn't the people who demand everything from you. It's the people who stand beside you without expecting anything in return. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect isn't getting revenge. It's refusing to let anyone convince you that your kindness makes you weak. Karen thought throwing me out would give her complete control over my father's legacy. Instead, it forced me to discover something much more valuable, my own, and that, more than the money, the house, or the legal victory, was the best outcome I could have ever asked for.